Hi, thanks for tuning in today. Today, I want to give you an overview of some resources to help you in your study of the Book of Revelation. As some of you will already know, I'm in the process of reevaluating the Book of Revelation, going more deeply into it, and sort of ironing out some of the um, little wrinkles in my understanding of the book, and just overhauling some things and just rethinking a lot. And so I'll share with you some of the resources that I think are most valuable. Someone had asked me a question about what are some of the most valuable resources for kind of getting into the Book of Revelation, understanding the various views. And right out of the gate, I'll just start sharing some resources here with you. The one I would mention that might be helpful to you if you're brand new to this and you're trying to get a feel for the different perspectives, it doesn't hurt to start with one of the books called The Four Views or Three Views. They've got different names, but I'll display one on the screen here. It's Four Views on the Book of Revelation. It's really helpful to kind of get an overview of the different perspectives that are out there. So you have a preterist perspective, you have a idealist perspective, you have a futurist perspective, and a historicist perspective. These four perspectives, generally most any commentator who writes on the Book of Revelation falls into one of those categories. So the four views on the Book of Revelation will help get your feet wet and help you kind of evaluate what different views are. If I say the word preterist and you have no idea what I mean, this book will kind of give you a overview of what that means. If you don't know what the word historicist means, you can check out this book and kind of get a short essay on each one of these perspectives. It doesn't take long to get through these books, so you'll walk away hearing from all four sides. So now it's popular now to take an eclectic approach, which kind of combines some of these four views. But those are the four, those four perspectives. Most everyone sort of falls into one of those categories. Then there's a Three Views on the Millennium book, which is also really helpful to kind of get an understanding about the different views that are out there on the millennium. There's a postmillennial perspective, there's a premillennial perspective, and there's an amillennial perspective. And if you don't know what those terms mean, and if you're watching this video, I assume you probably have a decent idea about what those are. But if you want to kind of go just a little bit deeper and kind of see an argument for each one of those perspectives, these kinds of books will help. You might know what a preterist is, you might know what a historicist is, but you might have no idea why anybody would even think about holding a preterist or historicist view. This will give you a good, well-argued essay for each position. So I think those are, if you're starting brand new and you're wanting to evaluate or at least just get to know what the different views are out there and why people hold different views that they do, those are good books to start with. Now, if you're entering into the Book of Revelation, you're going to want to, one of the important questions at the beginning of it is the date, when it was written. There's two major views that are held in regards to the date of the Book of Revelation. So there is an early date, which dates the Book of Revelation sometime prior to the fall of Jerusalem in the year 70. And there's what's called the late date, which would date the Book of Revelation sometime in the 90s, in the era of Domitian. And if you want to see a argument for the early date, in my judgment, the very best book that I've come across for that is the one that's been done by Dr. Kenneth Gentry. He argues very forcefully and very well, and in my judgment, persuasively, that the Book of Revelation was written prior to the fall of Jerusalem. If you want the other perspective, that it was written after the fall of Jerusalem, you can find this work online. It was done by Mark Hitchcock, and Mark Hitchcock basically it's a doctoral dissertation doing what he can to rebut Dr. Kenneth Gentry's work. So there's a spectrum, and I think those two will provide you very good arguments. If you want to take a late date or an early date, those two are very strongly and tightly argued. My view is that the book of Revelation was written prior to the fall of Jerusalem, but you might have a different perspective on that. Those two books will argue, one will argue for the late date, one will argue for the early date. So Kenneth Gentry for early date and Mark Hitchcock for the late date. Now, moving on to special studies of the book of Revelation, there's only one that I would really want to call to your attention right now that I found very helpful. And no matter what perspective you hold on the book of Revelation, I think there's really valuable information in this. And that's a special study that's been done by Dr. Richard Bauckham. Dr. Richard Bauckham has written a book called The Theology of the Book of Revelation, which I thought there were very, very many insights there about the structure and the layout of the book of Revelation. I read that book a few years ago, and it still resonates with me, and I find many things in it that were helpful in understanding the book of Revelation. So Richard Bauckham's book, The Theology of the Book of Revelation. So I'm going to take you now to a different resource, and it's called bestcommentaries.com. If you're not familiar with it, it's pretty helpful. And just let me start, let me say something in the outset about commentaries and even everything I've mentioned so far. I think that as Bible believers, our foundation, what we truly hold to, what we hold fast to, is the scriptures themselves. Every single commentary, every single thing that man has written, every commentary on the book of Revelation that I could hold up to you has flaws. None of them are perfect. So for me, what I look for in a good commentary, and this is just me personally speaking, is not one that tells me what I mean, you want the author to take a position, right? But you also want him to be interacting with the other views that are out there. So in a good commentary, I'm looking for one that has an awareness of other views that are out there, because sometimes I've found in the past that I'll be studying a commentary, the author has one perspective, but he exposes me to a different perspective than his own, and sometimes I find myself siding with the view that he's arguing against. So this interaction of various views out there for me is very important. So if you're looking for commentaries just to tell you, symbol A means symbol A means this, and this means that, and not really interact with different resources and things like that, I'm not going to be too helpful to you on that front, because that's not the kind of commentary that I look for. And I just want you to be careful if you're using other resources. Just realize that they're done by fallible people, imperfect people. But anyways, enough of that. Let's just get into the resources here. There's a website that's called bestcommentaries.com, and you can go to that, and if I can share my screen with you, I will take you to that. Bestcommentaries.com, and you'll see some of the top commentaries on the book of Revelation. I'll give you some thoughts on some of the ones that I've used. You can see they're ranked, what different scholars have ranked them as most valuable, helpful. I'll mention first this one here by Stephen Smalley. I have this one right here. It's a very thick volume, and I've kept it on my desk because I was hoping to kind of use it as I was working through the book of Revelation. And in fairness, I haven't used this one just a whole lot yet. I've used it some, and my impression of it has been so far, he takes an early date, by the way. Stephen Smalley will take an early date on the book of Revelation, and he sort of takes more of an idealist approach, and he would go more to the amillennial side of things. But when you look at his argument for the first resurrection, that's one of the things that I looked at. How does he handle the first resurrection? I just felt like his treatment of it was for a volume this big, and to take the position that he does, I just didn't think he provided very much argumentation. Different things that I've looked at for it, I thought the subtitle here is a commentary on the Greek text. I thought it would be more helpful on some of the things regarding some of the more technical issues of the language, And while the Greek text is there, and while he does go into some of that, so far, I should be careful again. I just want to be very clear. I haven't used this resource all that much yet, but so far, for the most part, I've been fairly disappointed. It seems to me that he takes mostly an idealist perspective, that the book of Revelation was written prior to the fall of Jerusalem. But I think he takes it, if I recall correctly, in his introduction, he takes the date in the reign of Vespasian. That was one of the other things I was disappointed with, is that his introduction, when he's arguing for some of these things at the beginning, I thought it was thin argumentation. When I looked at the beginning of the introduction to try to get a feel for, this is supposed to be a commentary on the Greek text of the Apocalypse, of the book of Revelation, his interaction and knowledge about what's going on in the manuscript tradition just seemed to be kind of almost like a repetition of another commentary that I have. So far I've been relatively disappointed, although this is highly rated by others. Others have really praised this one, so maybe there's some stuff in here that I'm missing. We'll see as we go along. But that was the first physical copy of these this list that was on here. Let's look at Robert L. Thomas. Now, Robert L. Thomas, I do not have a physical copy of that one, but I've been consulting Thomas here and there as I'm looking at different issues, and so far I've been favorably impressed with Thomas's commentary. It's a big commentary set. It's 2 volumes. It's 1,244 pages, and it does tend to be on the technical side. He takes a late date for the book of Revelation, and he argues for basically a futurist perspective. Where I have consulted Thomas, I was looking at the 7th trump, for example, here just recently, and I thought his treatment of it was very honest. I thought that some of the particulars in the passage I was looking at was a little bit hurtful to his position, but I felt like he dealt with it in a pretty honest way. And so far, my interaction with Robert Thomas's work has been positive. I wouldn't agree with him on everything or a lot of things, but his treatment of the Greek text is deep. It's more on the technical level, and I've been favorably impressed with Thomas's commentary. The next one on here is the one by Craig Keener. This one is, it's interesting how he handles the Millennium. Okay, so Craig Keener takes a late date for the book of Revelation, and this particular commentary is more on the, it's more pastoral and devotional. That's what the P&D stands for. But Craig is a great scholar. I mean, Craig Keener, I said Craig like I know him, but Craig Keener is a brilliant, brilliant scholar. He has a vast array of knowledge of the background literature, for Second Temple Judaism. Brilliant, brilliant guy. So his commentary, just in that respect, is really good. This is not a technical commentary, and it's very interesting how he handles the Millennium, for example. It's something that I've looked at in his commentary. He takes a premillennial perspective for the book of Revelation, but then he argues, he says, but you might have other evidence that outweighs the evidence in the book of Revelation. So he acknowledges that there's, at least in principle, he acknowledges that there might be good arguments for other perspectives. But he thinks that the weight of the evidence favors premillennialism. But for my purposes, I don't find Keener's commentary that helpful to me personally, because it's not as technical as I would like. But if you're looking for a very simple commentary, and that will also give you application, how you can apply it, maybe something that you want to teach and help people to apply the book of Revelation to their life, Craig Keener is awesome resource to have if you're wanting to maybe teach through the book of Revelation and give some of the principles that are involved there, and also to get some of the background information for the book of Revelation. So Craig Keener's work, that's a good one, just not that useful to me right now in my studies. Now, one that's not on the list here that I will mention that is staying on my desk is more technical, and this might not be helpful to you. This isn't so much arguing for premillennialism, amillennialism, preterism, or any of that. It's really just dealing with the details of the Greek text and how the Greek text is relating, and syntactically. So if you're wanting to get into the syntax of the Greek text, this resource by David L. Mathewson is helpful. This is a helpful volume. It is about a little over 300 pages long, and it goes into a lot of the information that you're going to want for technical syntactical studies. This is going to be somebody who's been through beginning Greek and probably has studied some intermediate Greek for it to be anywhere helpful to you at all. So that's one that I would say. Another one that's not on the list that I wish I would have mentioned at the beginning of this video now, honestly. For those who are just wanting to try to get their feet wet and understand the four different perspectives on the book of Revelation, this book by Steve Gregg is excellent. He takes each passage of Scripture and then he shares what all four perspectives would say on that. So I'm almost tempted to reorganize this, because this is actually really helpful for people who are trying to get their feet wet in understanding the book of Revelation. It's really good because he's aware of some of the major commentators who take different positions, whether it's futurist, historicist, preterist, and then he just gives their view on each passage, so you can see them side by side, each view. Now, one of the weaknesses of this, this comes in at about 500 pages, about 500 pages here. So it's pretty thorough, but you're not going to catch all the nuances. You can't in a volume that size when you're arguing four different perspectives, because there's perspectives out there within those broader camps that he's not going to be able to give depth to. At best, he can put a bookmark and say, hey, other people see it this way, but he can't give a lot of depth to it. But this is an excellent resource to have if you just want to get your feet wet and understanding the different perspectives. Another one that didn't make the list here, we're going to get to Unz, Mounts, Osborne, and Beals. Man, I'm getting a lot of emails while I'm doing this video. We're going to get into Mounts, Osborne, and Beal in just a minute, but I want to show you some that aren't at the top of the list here that I've used some. And one of those, which one should I grab here? Okay, yeah, here's one that is often forgotten about. I don't know if it makes the list at all on this Best Commentary series. I don't see it at all, and that is a real shame, because this is written by Moses Stewart. It's a 2-volume set of it. I've got the actual commentary right here. I've got it digitally. You can get it on Logos, but Moses Stewart's treatment of the book of Revelation, depending on what perspective you have, you might not be interested in anybody's views other than the one that you already have. But if you're interested at all in a preterist perspective, a partial preterist perspective, Moses Stewart doesn't think the entire book of Revelation is fulfilled. Was fulfilled in his day. He was writing, I think, around the 1850s or something like that, maybe 1840s, brilliant scholar. His interaction with the Greek text is excellent. His awareness of other views that are out there is great. He's interacting. He's a conservative himself, but he's aware of the more liberal views that are out there, and he interacts with those different views very well. So it's a very good resource if you're looking for a partial preterist perspective on the book of Revelation. And even if you're looking at other views, this is just a really good resource. His interaction on a very technical level with the Greek is very good. So I want to give a shout out to Moses Stewart's commentary. What else? Another one. Okay, the Anchor. This volume has been replaced. This particular volume has been replaced now in the Anchor Bible Commentary series. This one's done by Ford, and in this, this takes an early date to the book of Revelation. In fact, very early. It's a very idiosyncratic view. It doesn't believe that John is the Ford doesn't believe that John is the author. John, the apostle, is the author of the book of Revelation. Is actually John the Baptist. So that's very odd. The reason I mention it, though, is some of the treatments. To me, at least, this particular commentary has its highs and lows. Some of the things that I wish that would have been handled more deeply or handled in a very shallow way, but there's other things that are in the commentary that I found that were fairly useful, but its uniqueness is very interesting. It is dating the book of Revelation very early, so that's an honorable mention there. Another one that is a little bit hard to evaluate is this one by David Chilton. It's called The Days of Vengeance. This is also an early date commentary on the book of Revelation. And Chilton also, in this book, takes a partial preterist approach. This particular volume, in my judgment, has some excellent things about it, some excellent qualities, and I wish my computer would stop dinging here. It has some excellent qualities about it. He takes a post-millennial, early date, partial preterist perspective on the book of Revelation, but there are some points and some things that he makes in here, some which are unique, very unique. He draws together a lot of technical work on the book of Revelation, and there's some things in here that I found that no other commentator has ever touched before. So it's a real mixed bag in my judgment. The Days of Vengeance by David Chilton. To get back to the best commentaries list here, we're going to talk about David Oon. David Oon's commentary, it's a 3-volume set, Word Biblical Commentary. I have it right now in Olive Tree, and I've used it quite a bit. David Oon is another kind of mixed bag. If you're looking for technical discussions on the book of Revelation, who's aware of some of the higher, so-called higher criticism, David Oon is good. It has its moments where it's excellent. Some of the insights are quite good. I hesitate to recommend it because it takes more of a liberal approach to the book of Revelation, in my judgment. But its interaction with the Greek text is very good, very thorough. His knowledge of the other views that are out there and his interaction is quite good. So overall, I'm going to say David Oon is a good resource to have if you're wanting to interact with the book of Revelation in a very deep way, interact with it with the Greek text. It's a good resource. I just want you to know that it's not the most conservative resource that's available right now. So that is what it is. Robert Mounts, his commentary in the NICNT set. I should tell you a little bit. Let me mention David Oon. You want David Oon's perspective. David Oon takes a very odd view on the dating of the book of Revelation. He wants to say it's written, he wants to take a late date and an early date view on the book of Revelation. So he thinks that there's portions like Revelation 11 that are prior to 80, maybe written prior to AD 70, and then portions of it that are written later. So that's why I say his views are a little bit different. So yeah, anyways, it's just a kind of a mixed bag as far as I'm concerned. But if you're looking for a good technical commentary that interacts with the scholarly resources of the day, that's it. Robert Mounce. Interesting, Robert Mounce's commentary, he takes a late date on the book of Revelation. He takes a premillennial approach to the book of Revelation. It's listed here as more of a technical commentary. I'm not sure that I would call it that. I think anybody can dip into Mounce's commentary and glean from it. There's a lot of good things in it. He's aware of the various views that are out there. He hesitates from speculating too much, which is good, right? So I mean, it's good that he's not wildly speculating, I guess. But sometimes that makes his interpretations kind of thin. His level of detail isn't there sometimes. I mean, it comes in at 439 pages, which seems pretty big. But if you're wanting to go really deep on a particular section, I've found sometimes his commentary is fairly thin. Next one up on the list of the best commentaries, Grant Osborne. This is another one that I have digitally. I think I have this one. I know I have this one on Kindle. Grant Osborne takes a late date perspective for the book of Revelation. He takes a premillennial perspective. The interesting thing about Osborne is he changed his mind. So he was an early date advocate. And he's one of those who, on the dating of Revelation, he takes the late date, but he sort of does it with a furrowed brow, right? So he's a little bit, not quite 100% sure that he's right, but this is the position that he takes. He thinks there's good arguments for the early date as well. But Grant Osborne is really good because he does such a good job. He's accessible, yet he's aware of the technicalities. So that you'll see an interaction with the Greek text, but you don't have to know Greek to profit from Osborne's work. He's also familiar with the various views that are out there, and he takes his time to deal with those very, very well. Okay, so I had a little technical glitch there. We'll just pick up and talk about G.K. Beals' commentary on the book of Revelation. And he takes a amillennialist perspective. It's more of a technical commentary. It's the New International Greek Testament commentary. It's not quite as technical as the name would imply, so I think somebody who doesn't know Greek could still follow along with his basic arguments. He does have a more condensed version of it on a less technical level called a shorter commentary in the Greek New Testament. His major one in the NIGTC series weighs in at over 1,200 pages. His shorter one, I think, is still 500 pages, but it's less technical. He does a good job. He's an amillennialist. He does a good job of explaining his view, and he does a good job of going into depth on his view, and he does a good job interacting with the different views that are out there. So I've found his work to be helpful, even though there's many times I'm going to disagree with him, like all of these commentaries that I've mentioned. I think it is a good resource. He takes more of an idealist perspective that is centered around events of the first century. So in other words, what I would say is that though he's not a classical preterist, because he doesn't think the book was written prior to the fall of AD 70, he does think that the events that were happening in the first century shape a lot of the book of Revelation, such that he can take sort of more of an idealist perspective and kind of more of an eclectic approach and look at some of the circumstances that were happening in the first century and see how that they are applied later on in history. So G.K. Beale is a helpful resource. One that's not mentioned on here, I don't think. Another partial preterist commentary would be Milton Terry's commentary. I'm just starting to use that a little bit, but he's very clear in his explanations. He was an Old Testament scholar from the 1800s, mid to late 1800s, Old Testament scholar, and he takes a early date on the book of Revelation, and he's very clear in his explanations. I thought his treatment on Revelation chapter 11, for example, was quite good. So anyways, that's another honorable mention is Milton Terry's commentary on the book of Revelation. So I think that is some of the main resources that you're going to encounter when you talk about the book of Revelation. If you're looking for one book that I liked that I didn't mention, I thought I'd have it here somewhere. If you're looking for more of if you're looking for a simple book that takes more of a futurist approach, and you want quick, easy answers to about every prophecy in the Bible that's won by Wolverd, this is kind of I've found this to be kind of a handy book. Like I said, I don't necessarily agree with everything, but it's real handy. This is kind of a holistic book. It's more of a dispensational perspective. So I've just tried to give you sort of a broad array of different resources. Another one that I would mention that's come out recently, which is more of a popular level commentary, is one by Douglas Wilson, When the Man Comes Around. It takes a partial preterist perspective, and it's light on details but easy on reading. So it's a very easy read, and if you're looking for something on a partial preterist perspective that's very accessible, gives you quick answers without getting into a lot of details, I've really found this commentary to be an interesting one. So those are some of the main resources that I have been referring to, looking at. I think they're all have their use and place, but the main thing is that we make ourselves subject to Scripture. Scripture is our authority. None of these books, all these books are just helps. They're things that other people who have been studying the Bible, hopefully, carefully and prayerfully, have come to, and sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they might not help, but just, as someone who spent a lot of time looking at the book of Revelation, studying the book of Revelation, thinking about the book of Revelation, I thought a video like this might be helpful to other people who are kind of taking a similar journey and want to know what resources are available, what different perspectives are out there. So I hope you find this video useful, and we'll see you on the next one.